Hello and welcome to Tippcast. We've got a huge show coming as ever this week. We know it's going to be, well, it's not quite winner takes all, but it's a huge match between Tipperary and Waterford in the Munster Hurling Championship. Delighted to say I'm joined by some men who've got plenty of skin in the game here. We're all looking forward to it massively. Joined by Shane Brophy of the Nina Guardian and Brian Flannery, who of course has donned both colours over the years. How are the two men going? We'll start off with you, Shane.
Cautiously optimistic.
Wow,
but anxious at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, what are you thinking? I mean, you obviously got a foot in both camps in terms of at least hearing what the mood is. What are you thinking?
Well, look, I can't go wrong, I suppose. Look, if
all right,
if Waterford win, I have a young fella who'll be delighted anyway. And if Tipp win, I suppose, look, it'll give him a big boost as well. But I suppose it's that I'm actually on my holidays in Tipperary, which will be from Tramore up to Tipperary on my Easter holidays. That's as good as it gets, but I do sense, I suppose, in North Tipperary certainly there's probably lower expectation, I suppose, than you would expect for one of the powerhouses of hurling in Tipperary. There seems to be, I suppose, almost resignation that this dreaded word transition is in place, and that expectations are more moderate than normally you'd be talking about, optimism and championship runs and titles and Munster championships and that. So there seems to be certainly a lesson in that in Tipperary. And I suppose the opposite is in Waterford. It's for a county that hasn't won an All-Ireland in 1959. I suppose there is that optimism that this team in particular, there's kind of no excuses, or there's no areas where they can, to say that needs attention. It seems to be, their best place to compete with Limerick would be the general perception, and it's hard to argue against that when you go through it in detail. The stars of that minor team and under-21 team, they're all 27, 26, 27 years of age now. The age profile is perfect. Waterford have been to a Munster final, they've been to an All-Ireland final, they've been to a league final, they've won one out of three of those three finals, so they have that experience as well. So it's I think that it's a case of turn up and perform, really.
Yeah, even a term you used when we spoke the last time was Waterford are in win now mode, and that kind of stuck with me, and I actually agree with you on that. Noel Walsh says, hi guys, best of luck, Tipp. Get your comments in, let us know what you're thinking ahead of the weekend. I'm hearing some stories, Shane, of some tickets being sent back from Tipperary clubs, which kind of highlights the mentality in the county at the moment for some people.
Yeah, sure. I think we get about 4,000 of them, which in championship terms is a very small. It's a small allocation. Like, if you can't shift them, it does say a lot. Like, you can have the excuse that maybe for the northern half of the county, it's a long trek. It's Easter Sunday. Maybe people are tied up with families. I suppose it is that new feel to the championship that we're starting so early. Like it's 5 weeks. If you go back to 2019, the last comparable round robin, it's 5 weeks earlier. The championship starting now compared to then. Like, so it's, I mean, there's some factors, but I think there's no doubt about it. There's a fear that what doesn't matter what Tipp do at the weekend, they're going to lose. And I would say there's a scenario where, look, I think everybody within Dr. Morris Park are going down there to win, and like there's enough winners between the selectors and the players that they will be going down there nothing but victory in mind. But there is a scenario, and it's not taking moral victories, but if Tipp play well and come out of there with momentum to take into the Clare game, I don't think that's a bad position to be in. Like, it's just because of where Waterford are, and like I don't think it's something Brian said about Liam Cahill taking away all the excuses, and I think that's a key one for me. There'll be no hangovers from the league final. If you go back to last year, okay, you could say they were hurling 5 weekends in a row by the time they hurled Limerick, and they sort of blew up after 25 minutes. I think Cahill went away and said, "Oh, we're not going to blow up again this year. We're going to get fitter and stronger than everyone else." And it's something he said after the league match 6 weeks ago. He says, "We've put an awful lot of work into these guys," and you can see it in their physique and their physical fitness. They are going very strong. And even if a guy maybe starts to slow down, they have just as good a guy, if not better, to replace him coming on the field. So they will not. I'd agree with Brian in terms of that. Liam Cahill has taken away all the excuses. Like the only reason I think Waterford might not win a game this year is just because the other team will be better than him on the day. I think he's really steeled those players' minds that if they go out and perform, they'll be very, very hard to beat by any team this year.
Yeah, Waterford is a little bit tricky to get to from some parts of Tipperary, but still Cork Limerick is probably going to be not far off a sellout. So I don't know how much I buy into it. I think there probably is.
You'll always have an excuse in Tipp. There's always excuses here. Brian knows.
Oh look, we've lots of them, but other lads are ignorant enough to call it out when they don't believe in them either. Do you know what? Let's go straight to the tactics board, because just looking at the two teams that we expect that might appear this weekend, I'll start off with you, Brian. It probably won't be too far off of this. Obviously, Austin Gleeson was suspended from the last game out. I've just put him in directly here for Mikey Cahill. He could be wrong. Maybe Liam Cahill will spring a surprise. But just in terms of the 15, before we move them around, do you think this mightn't be too far off what we see at the weekend?
Yeah, I think pretty much. And, in the aftermath of the league final and his post-game interview, Liam Cahill, was very quick to mention that only players who are 100% fit will be considered. So I think that was kind of, laying the landscape that the likes of Jamie Byrne, Peter Hogan, players that have been carrying injuries for the last week or two, are unlikely to feature in the starting lineup for Waterford. So I would certainly say that the one change will be Austin Gleeson. I was in Mount Sion during the week, and I suppose, look, we were all debating it, would he be mad enough to leave Austin out of the team? But I think there's star players, you make exceptions. He made a small mistake, was suspended for the last day. He served his time. I don't think you players of his caliber, I don't think you need to be making a point or anything at this stage. It's championship. It's you got to win. So yeah, I would see Austin coming back in, probably more so maybe in the half forward line, Shane. If you look at Waterford in general, Prendergast tends to wear number 15, and he's kind of the player that could it'll pop up in the half forward line, it'll pop up in the middle of the field a lot. You could have maybe a two inside forward line with maybe Desi and Stephen Bennett, Desi Hutchinson, and as I said, Austin will more likely to be, I would say, spend most of his time in the half forward line. But look, the way players in modern game is, they'll spend, I suppose, look, there'll be a lot of movement throughout, but I think that'll be pretty much it. I think the big formidable line from a Waterford point of view is that half-back line. Callum Lyons is not only a fine defender, but his ability to attack from deep, that's something. He's only coming back from injury, came back into the team, came on in the league semi-final, started the league final. I think will only get better, needs probably a game or two, in fairness. And Jack Fagan on the other wing, I suppose, has been a revelation this year, being relocated from half forward. So he's another, this is where I suppose Tipperary are going to, that's why I probably expect Michael Breen will play wing forward to pick up one of those attacking Waterford halfbacks. And you have Ty de Burke again, will probably sit that little bit deeper as he does with your Dara Lyons and in middle of the field, maybe covering for him. I think we've probably got a bit of a nod to the starting lineup with Cara Daly being withdrawn from the Waterford Under-20 team for tonight's game. So he's likely to start in at centre field. So it'll be pretty much the league final team, with the exception of Austin Gleeson. But probably you're right. I think Michael Kiley may be the one to lose out. But, again, to have players like Michael Kiley. Oric Manny, I suppose, is a player that's done very well when he's been introduced as well. So he's another option from the bench with Peter Hogan. But I think you'll have that sort of shape for Waterford. For a lot of the game, you will have maybe just Desi Bennett inside, with Jack Prendergast, probably nominally wearing the number 15 jersey, but playing out the field a lot. I think that's that's very possibly the way it'll look, Shane.
Yeah, it's a very impressive looking team. I suppose I'll bring it back up and look at it from a Tipp point of view. And Shane, you might chime in then as we go along here. If that happens, I think we've seen Barrett pick up Hutchinson, and it didn't really go Barrett's way in the league game last year, but Tipperary were getting run through, so I don't really put all the blame on him. Quigley then may pick up Bennett if that's the case. I'm wondering, will Morgan come out the field and go after Prendergast, or could you see Morgan even on Curran and Alan Flynn, who is pretty comfortable out the field? Now, Alan Flynn is the one you've picked. You see the team going that way, Shane. Maybe it'll be Robert Byrne, who's played all those games. But what way would you see Colin Bonner arranging things here if that's how Waterford set up?
Yeah, I suppose we have to taper this thing. I suppose the fact that we haven't seen Tipperary play against Antrim, and look, we all thought leaving Semple Stadium that day that okay, we were getting close to the team, but that doesn't, 4 weeks is a long time. There could be a couple of players absolutely ripping it up in training that are going to force the way in. The reason I went with Flynn is he gives you that flexibility to go into different positions in the half-back line in midfield that maybe if you were going for an out-and-out right-wing back and Robert Byrne or Dylan Quirk probably just doesn't give you. So he can go on a Patrick Curran, or he can go out and follow Jack Prendergast, and you can bring out Craig Morgan if you want, or even Cahill Barrett can be allowed drift up the field too. He's very, very good in possession. The middle of the field does worry me because just the legs of Darragh Lyons and Corrick Daly. I think Darragh Lyons has been... his form this year has been incredible. His improvement has been absolutely massive. And would Barry Heffernan or Dan McCormack have the legs for that? That's going to be tough for them. I would have said Dan was a guaranteed starter a few weeks ago. I'm not so sure now. Just with what Waterford is in there, would you bring him on in the second half when maybe I suppose the game hopefully is still in the balance?
Well, last time Dan McCormack wasn't starting in the Championship was against Limerick in late 2020, and we were all pulling our hair out that he wasn't. So I'd be amazed if he wasn't started. You need lads who are up for the fight, and there's no one more up for it than him. The thing I have had, and I said that to you, Shane, before the show, I don't have John McGrath in my team, but I think he'll start, but I just don't know where, because I personally think Tyke de Burke is so important to Waterford. I think you need to put one of the McGraths on him or close to him to give him a problem, because I think Tyke de Burke had too much respect for either of the McGraths to allow them to drift. And you could say, okay, Darragh Lyons might drop back and pick up one or two. I do think maybe Conor Bowe might get sacrificed, but I do think Tipp like the idea of Breen and Bowe on the wings, guys that can go up and down the field, and I suppose maybe give Jack Fagan and Callum Lyons something to think about, go the other way as well. But then on the other hand, I don't see one of Jake Morris, Mercury or Jake Morris being sacrificed either. So do you sacrifice a Dan McCormack, or do you put Barry Heffernan back in the half-back line to put Noel McGrath in midfield? It's a tough one. I don't know what you think, whether you think the two McGraths will start. I think they will, but I think both of them can't. I think John's best position is in the half-hour line, and so is Noel's. So it's... I've been thinking about this a lot as well, and I'll throw it to you in a second, Brian. But this is how I think Tipperary might line up, right? So I think John McGrath might actually start and Noel might not. I think Morris and Ford will both be in and around this area, and you might have John McGrath trying to get out in Tyke de Burke's face a little bit, almost with the hope that maybe, that Prunty might end up following out with him, and you almost leave Prunty as the spare man by marking their centre back, which is an odd thing for someone of John McGrath's quality to do, but he's not at his very, very best form just at the moment. But he's a great worker, he's a very diligent player, so perhaps you could see something like that happening. And Ford, he's been pilfering a lot of points from the half-forward line. He can obviously swap in and out as well. I see Breen and Bowe being up and down on the graveyard shift all day on the wings. Brian, what would you think? I mean, do you think that would make sense from a Tipp point of view? What would you do if you were trying to close down the Burka? Because you can't let the Burka beat you.
Yeah, look, I think if you look at, I suppose, opportunities for Tipperary, if you look at the Kilkenny game with that Waterford played, Pádraig Welch played centre forward, and he scored 5 points from play on Burka, where Tyke de Burke really just didn't mark him at all, and Pádraig Welch drifted left, right, inside, outside, and ended up scoring 5 points from play. Now, Kilkenny were very careful not to, I suppose, make a hero of Corker and hit ball down on top of him. I think Tipperary have got to, if they're going to have a chance, they've got to do something similar. I think Noel McGrath is, an ideal player in position who can drift off the centre back, scoring in from 60 yards, who can score for the centre. But you got to get him the ball. Do you know what I mean? If it's something that would have to be worked on training. Now, Jason Ford is the same, and we've seen Jason Ford do similar when he plays that centre forward position, drifting left and right, picking up, where the centre back is unwilling to track him. That's where you can get some joy and get space. But to me, Noel McGrath would be that player where he can drift out in centre field, and if he's not picked up, but you got then to get the ball to him. The players, Tipperary half back line coming out, have got to be looking for him. And he's an intelligent player, Noel McGrath. If it's not on, he can play balls inside to Keogh or Morris in the corners. He rarely wastes ball. I would certainly be looking at maybe Noel McGrath in that central position to try and knit the play together, because you're going to need accuracy. It's yes, you need legs, but you also need accuracy. It's probably one of the reasons on the other side of the field that Patrick Curran has found a niche in the team, because he's just too good a hurler not to have on the team. He's not the quickest or the up and down type of half forward as well, but he needs to play together, and his passing is accurate. I would look at Noel McGrath if I was Tipperary in that sort of 11. I think Camogie used to once upon a time have three in the middle of the field where they'd have a centre, and I think Noel McGrath can drift into that space that's there for an intelligent centre forward. But it's not going to be easy, obviously. With the big thing we were mentioning about Cahill Barrett and Quigley or maybe Morgan or whoever else is going to be in the full back line. If there's time and space, if the Tig, the Burkers and these have time, I don't think it matters whether it is Finn or Barrett or whomever. If they get time to place ball in front of Desi Hutchinson and a Stephen Bennett or an Austin Gleeson, it'll be curtains. They've got to, if I was looking at it from a Tipperary point of view, they've got to put pressure on that Tip defence. I don't think you can. This goes back to maybe your balance or your mix. You certainly can't be carrying players who are not willing to work and chase and run players down. But like we've seen this past. I certainly remember John McGrath chasing, was it Walter Welsh down in an All-Ireland final and saving it. But it's not as if Tip players are not capable of doing this. But they'll need to be on it from the throw-in. They'll need to be concentrated. They need to be focused. You just can't lose your position. You can't. We saw that some of the goals Waterford scored against Wexford in the league semi-final, where a lazy half-back doesn't track Austin Gleeson, and the next minute you're picking the ball out of the net. It's that level of concentration, I suppose, that will be required to make sure that Tipperary can compete and that are in with a chance of winning.
Do you think they might go back to something like last year? Okay, if you wanted to accommodate the two McGraths, maybe you put Noel on the wing. Remember last year in the All-Ireland quarter final, he played wing forward on Callum Lyons, and okay, I think Lyons got 1 or 2 points, but I think Noel played off against him. I think Noel got in for the goal chance at the very start. Like they sort of used Lyons' sort of forward thinking game against him, and he got caught, and that you may be a sacrifice to Conor Bowe and maybe you hold him back, but I'm hearing great things about the man flying and training, this guy that comes out of the woodwork at this time of the year. So whether they go down that road, because I do agree that I think Tipper, if you have the two McGraths on the field, not only will they get points, but I think Tip have to get goals, and these boys are just so mentally, they're so sharp mentally. They will see a pass that will play in Mark Keogh or Jake Morris or Jason Ford. I think they're the three, and Breen coming from deep, if he gets a ball in behind the half back line, he's going to try and go for a goal too. So he's the speed. So I just maybe I don't foresee Tip winning this game without getting 3 or 4 goals, because I think Waterford held back a small bit in the league match, only getting 1. Like I think they will really go for the jugular this time, like they've been doing in the last couple of league games for goals.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just imagine that Tipperary probably will only start one of the two McGraths, and you need some quality to bring off the bench too. So either of those would constitute that. But like if you look at the Tipperary team now, like last year considered, that you too many players who've an awful lot of miles on the clock, and that ultimately not any one person on their own, but overall that began to kind of build up in terms of how they ran out of gas in the odd game here and there. But if you look at this team now, Quigley's a young man, obviously should be able to go for the 70 minutes. We haven't seen too much of him. Morgan is kind of in a similar boat in terms of, this is pretty much like his first taste. But if you look at the amount of legs that are in the team, Barrett is fast and is able to run. So is Kendi. So is Barry Heffernan. So is Conor Bowe. He's young and athletic. So is Breen. Morris is pacey. Keogh is pacey. Now, Noam McGann Ford, you may not say the same, and the same with whether you have John there. But this year, I think there should be a change in the amount of athleticism, Brian, and Tipperary being able to go for 70 minutes. Even though, look, Colin Bonner's been dealt a tough hand because he's down a huge amount of players on last year, and that's not even taken into consideration. Brian O'Mara, Niall O'Mara being away, and there's one other there as well, Kieran Connolly. So it's tough from that point of view. But I see this Tipp team having legs. Tactically, game plan might take longer for Colin Bonner, but legs should be there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, I suppose, puck outs as well. I mean, I think when Tipperary were really good, they would go after teams. I don't know what year it was, the real bad wet day Munster final, Tipp and Waterford up in the Gaelic grounds, and the puck out was straight down on top of
was it 2016? Yeah, you had fellas,
you had Tipp forwards running from all angles underneath it, and they got 3 or 4 goals in a shot. Whether they have the personnel to do that now is probably questionable, but it is something they're going to have to retain possession. They're going to have to be smarter and I suppose look not give it away cheaply. But that, you mentioned the players that are missing, the retirements as well. You haven't even kind of we probably haven't touched on that. Like in essence, Tipperary need new heroes. It has to be a Jake Morris, a Mark Keogh, Ger Brown, Conor Bowe we mentioned. They need new heroes. We're probably all fairly happy or what you're going to get from Cahill Barrett and Ronan Maher and Ford and Breen, but they need new heroes if they're going to make an impact on the championship. And like it's a very tough championship. 2 of the big Munster teams are going to be gone in a few weeks. And I'm sure Tipperary don't want to be one of those. And in order to avoid that, you're going to have to win games somewhere. And you need that momentum going into a home game the following week against Lair. So, okay, I think there's a lot on the line here, but is it possible that it's just the uncertainty that the level of performance that we're talking about you haven't seen it from Tipperary in a while, and that's why I suppose the optimism isn't as what you'd expect. But are those players capable? I mean, Mark Keogh, Morris, these are the guys we're talking about. This is, this has to become their Tipperary team if we're going to go on and compete for silverware either this year or certainly the next year or two.
Yeah, River Power comes in with a comment here. After Flynn's league performances, I'd be surprised to see him included. Dan has looked off the boil, taken off at half time against Antrim. Antrim midfield player had a field day that day. That was Keelan Malloy, scored 5 in the first half. That said, you can't not start Dan. We need him, but if he's off, we're in trouble. Now, he may not have been necessarily marking Keelan Malloy for all of those. Where do you look at this Waterford team and think we have to worry the most? I mean, that full forward line, potentially Stephen Bennett and Desi Hutchinson. I think Hutchinson only had the ball in his hand 4 times against Cork in the league final, but he ran the legs off Cork and ultimately got his goal towards the end. I mean, there's so many Waterford players on that team that you think, and Shane, he could be quiet for 50 minutes, but he could still score 2-2, or, there's just such a threat with all those players.
Yeah, but Hutchinson is he's the team player you love to have. Like he nearly plays the game like he plays your lone striker up front, going left, going right. His job in a lot of ways is to clear out space for the runners to come into. Like I remember last year against Galway, he won a ball under the old stand side. I think it was about 3 Galway players around him, and he still managed to win it and get it away before the 3 Galway lads get in on top of him. Like I just think there's there's too many threats within that Waterford forward line for Tipp to focus essentially on one. Like they've really got you've got to try and restrict a lot of their influence as much as you can. I was just something, that idea came into my head there, that like James Quigley has done nothing wrong, but conventional wisdom says that Stephen Bennett won't spend an awful lot of time in the full forward line. He'll come out. So could you sacrifice Quigley and maybe give a man marking role to Seamus Kennedy and start somebody else out in the half back line? You have things like that. Like it's one of those games when maybe you don't really need an out and out full back, if you know what I mean. Like it's particularly if we accept Michael Kiley won't start, he'd probably be held in reserve. Like so, it all depends on what the Tipp management. The Tipp management probably will pick the team to suit themselves. I just think this Waterford team is too good, maybe not to have one eye and maybe giving yourselves giving yourselves maybe a helping hand. And maybe a Seamus Kennedy doing a man marking job, and Stephen Bennett could be an, because like he does tend to float, and we saw in that third quarter, particularly against Tipp in the league game, like his ability to fall back out the field and drive over points of 100 yards is ridiculous. Like he hit one point, you give out to a young lad. He didn't even look where he was hitting it and went over the bar. Like, well, so he has that bit of arrogance about him, and he knows he's good, like, and he's allowed to do it. And I suppose that's what Liam Cahill has sort of given a lot of these players. He's given them belief. I trust you to make the right decision, even if you think there's only a 10% chance of that shot going over. A lot of time it's working out for him.
Yeah, and like I did find it very unusual. Look, I caught an awful lot of slack to Colin Bonner in year one with the hand he's been dealt. But of all you're trying to find a new full back, and the only game he didn't play James Quigley in is the one game where you'd see, where are we at with this young man from Kildangan. I found that strange that he didn't play against Waterford. Do you, Brian? What do you think in terms of like Quigley going in there, and maybe this idea that Shane is talking about of Seamus Kennedy picking up Stephen Bennett no matter where he goes?
He did play against Waterford. He was just Dublin. He didn't play against. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think the way hurling is, and that, like, matter what jersey number it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. You've got to be prepared to, be able to stand in centre back maybe for 10 minutes, or play cornerback for 10 minutes, or middle of the field for 10 minutes. There's so much movement, and that there's so much movement in their team. You've got to be able to play in all 6 positions. Now you've got to probably, I suppose, communication in among the back line that, well, look, if Stephen is in inside, I'm taking him up. If he's in the half forward, I'm taking up. There's got to be very good communication and handover as well, because you're trying to track players, but you're also trying to keep a pretty solid structure, that you don't have these big gaps of spaces that you'll have a Montgomery or a Patrick Horn fellas pouring into. So you're trying to do both. You're trying to keep a good structure, and you're trying to make sure that there's pressure on the Waterford forwards as well. So its communication is hugely important, but you've got to be capable of playing in each position. I mean, look, I personally, I'd be more inclined to Barry Heffernan. I'd prefer to see him somewhere in the backline than the middle of the field, to be honest with you. And maybe even he's a kind of that modern sort of centre come full back where, I think he's probably best suited to play that position than any of the Tipperary players, perhaps. And I prefer maybe Ronan, as I said, Ronan Maher maybe on the wing or that. But look, that's a personal thing with me. There's no easy solutions, I suppose, and that's we're here talking today, and there's a fair degree of uncertainty of exactly who's going to play and where, which you don't have, I suppose. And that's, but Tipperary are going to, players are going to be handed championship jerseys. It's still, it's still a privilege for any guy to be handed a championship jersey, and for Tipperary or for any county. So there's a lot of responsibility as well. There's it's great to look forward to, and they can't not, they're going to have to perform. If there's any weakness, it will be exposed. They're going to have to. It's not just about physically matching up, but they're going to have to think their way through the game as well. So that's why as I said, that communication is going to be vital. You're going to have to, as I said, the concentration, decision making. That's, these are the things that make the difference. So that's why I'm, inclined to say, yeah, I want Noel McGrath in the starting lineup, because he's an intelligent, good decision maker as well. So you've got to find that balance between the athleticism as well as people who can, I suppose, knit it together. And is there enough of all those type of players in the squad? There probably is, but some guys have to, I suppose, take a leap in relation to performance, in relation to, I suppose, where their own individual careers are. And that's, from a Tipperary perspective, that's what we're looking for. Can guys make the leap into being, really good senior inter-county players?
Like, is there, I was going to say, to ask the two of you, like, is there anything to be said that I think Galway are in the same boat as Tipp, that Bonner and Shefflin went down the road in the league this year of looking at players, and the Forsyth they more or less putting a structured team or a game plan maybe to one side, and maybe is it something that we sort of just don't know that how would you say, Tipp would have gone away for the last 5 weeks, and the way in the old style championship you could nearly have a useless league, go away for 5 weeks and come back and be a completely different team. I'm not sure you can do it nowadays, but that Tipp could throw something that even in Waterford are not prepared for this weekend, because we sort of don't know anything about him, because as Bonner said, his focus was giving guys game time in the 5 league games, whereas and that puts maybe putting a game plan or a settled 15 to one side, that maybe the last 5 weeks was about them going away and, okay, lads, it's game on now for who wants the 15 jerseys for the start of the championship.
Well, the upside I've heard about the Dublin Challenge match that they had a few weeks ago, and Parnell Park wouldn't be too dissimilar to Walsh Park, so you can see that there's a bit of planning there, that obviously they want to try and replicate the environment that they'll play in. And I believe that they were working the ball through the lines really well, and they were delivered inside, and the likes of Jake Morris and Mark Yo were up there and causing damage in that game. So I'd be hopeful that you're actually right on that point of view, Shane. If I can pass it on to you, Brian, could I ask you, like, based on your conversations with people in Waterford and just your own take on the situation, your own analysis, where do you think that Tipperary could hurt Waterford? If I'll just bring up the teams again, and I can move things around as you want, but where do you think Tipperary could hurt this Waterford team?
Yeah, look, it's I suppose the most of the concern would still be in the Waterford full back line. I think Conor Gleeson has played very well this year. Has had a couple of ropey games in the past. Shane McNulty again is a comfortable halfback. Prunty himself, I mean, Seamus Callan, remember, scored 2 goals in the first half last year. So there is scores to be got if there's sufficient pressure put inside there. I suppose the caveat there is that Tadhg Burka has provided that extra, I suppose, little bit of safety net for the full backline. So we haven't seen recently an awful lot of teams, running at the likes of Conor Prunty. The ball does need to be, I think if Tipperary are going to have success, it needs to be coming through from that half forward line. It needs to be, Noel McGrath maybe winning the ball and somebody, maybe a Jake Morrissey having come out the field and running off his shoulder and then going straight down the gauntlet at the goals. It's I think that's where you'll find Welsh Park is tight enough to play a perfect ball into a corner. A corner forward still has an awful lot to do. I think it's more coming through that to engage that Waterford half backline, to draw out Tadhg Burka, to have guys running down that middle channel. And Michael Breen, for example, would be well capable of doing that, getting off somebody's shoulder and taking it straight down the middle, and going in and causing trouble and maybe drawing that last defender and giving the goal opportunity. That's where, if Tipperary are to win, they're going to have to get success around there. That area is going to, that'll probably be the game, if they can cause bother there. But it probably needs to be coming through from, as I said, your middle of the field. So I'm not sure, that's why maybe a more attack-minded guys in the centre of the field would get more purchase, I suppose, because they need to be augmenting the Tipperary attack, and that's what Waterford do. They overload areas at certain times. They're they're quick to do it. They've got that pace. As I said, they'll flood an area if the ball is landing in the right half forward position. They'll flood the area with maybe halfbacks or midfielders. We've got to be able to do something similar. Have players coming at pace, coming from deep, and taking that down the middle, running at the defence. And let's be honest, wants to be turned facing their own goals and running back chasing. And that's what Tipperary will have to do if they're going to have success.
Yeah, so we'll get to, I suppose, prediction time now. First off, Boom Boom 43 says, we're totally written off. John McGrath and Jason Ford must be delighted. I suppose there'll be no shortage of motivation in the Tipperary dressing room, considering they're pretty much written off. But maybe to continue that theme, Shane, what's your prediction for the game?
Yeah, just before I do, I think, just going back to the league match as well, I think a lot will be down to how quick the referee allows puck outs. I think Tipp Brian Hogan, if he's into, can't delay with puck outs if there's a short one on. I think the longer Tipp struck Waterford allowed set up their defensive structure under a puck out where it's going to hurt us. So I'd like to think Tipp would play a pretty fast, quick game. Like if Brian sees the ball on early to a cornerback or wing back or potentially a midfielder that's after getting 3 or 4 yards of space, I'd like to think he'll take it on. But look, that's down to the referee as well. So it's it's a tough ask for us. But look, it wasn't all bad a couple of weeks ago in the league game. Like, it was still a one-score game into 55th minute. Okay, the last 15 minutes didn't go well, and look, there was a couple of things highlighted. So look, I think Tipp will go down there well prepared. I think we're going to get a big performance. Whether it's enough to win, I'm not so sure. But look, minimum would be coming out of Waterford with momentum to take into the Clare game. And look, if the following Sunday, if it's a bad defeat, you think, Jesus, like, how do you pick yourselves up for a week's time? And look, there's a small bit of pressure on Waterford too, because look, if they don't win, they've got to go to Limerick 6 days' time, and potentially there could be no points out of 4. So look, there's massive gains for both sides and massive risks in this one. I think Waterford will win, but I think Tipp will push them all the way. I don't think this will be. I think we'll get a big Tipp performance. I think it's a tough ask to win, but look, these are always the sweet wins when they happen. Where, remember 2018, that All Ireland Under-21 final, that Cork had all the stars, and Tipp just pulled a performance out of nowhere to win, and maybe we're back in that position again. You never know.
Yeah, and hopefully you'd hope a few more of those Tipp Under-21s from that day would be here, but alas, they're not. Brian, what way do you think this will go?
Well, I don't know. I was just listening to Shane there. I was only sort of thinking that there's no losing bonus points in the hurling championship. It's wins and losses. Look, it's all the advantages seem to be stacked in one favour. It's a home game for Waterford. As I said, the league couldn't have gone much better. And I think that the great thing, I suppose, and it's a hallmark of Liam Cahill teams, and it's a great credit to Liam Cahill and his management team, is that whether Waterford are 10 points behind or 10 points up, they will play to the end. And they now have players, I suppose, of not just star quality, but they've players that and every line of the field that can, as I said, cause opposition problems. So you'd have to say that Waterford are deserving favourites on it, but they do need to win. And the questions that will be answered throughout the summer this year in relation to Waterford is, can they perform? Can they produce those type of performances? Under the severest of pressure when it really matters. And that's, we will see that this Sunday, because it is a pressure game. You've got to win your home games. Waterford's last game is away to Clare in Ennis. You'd certainly like to have a good few points in the bag before going there. They face Limerick next week up in Gaelic grounds. You've got to win your home games. I think, it's having watched all the games in the last year or two, the two league games in particular, even the championship game last year below in Porky Cleeve, even though there wasn't much in it at the end and Tipp had chances, Waterford were the better team. So look, I think it would be a surprise if Tipperary in this stage under a new management team could go to Welsh Park and turn Waterford over, having Waterford just won the league. I think it would be a surprise.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ned Driver says, why don't you guys call it as it is? Tipperary hurling has slipped off the radar and it isn't the team's fault. Tell the county board the facts on whose responsibility that it is. Okay, we'll talk about
I don't know what that has to do. I don't know how that has to do with getting ready for this match. Like, so look, that commenter could have egg in his face in a few weeks' time, and we're preparing for an All-Ireland quarter final. Like, so it's I suppose we're nearly stabbing into the dark in terms of Tipp. We'll know a lot. We'll have a fair idea of how strong or how weak this his team is after Sunday.
How do you see, Shane, the Tipperary Under-20s going this evening against Waterford at Semple Stadium? A good win against Kerry eventually last week. Didn't start out great. Kerry were well ahead in the first half. But you could see Tipperary were trying to move the ball through the lines, do what everyone is considering the modern hurling. So coming into this game, and as Brian has already mentioned, Cardiff Daly has been withdrawn because obviously senior has been prioritised for him this year. And players, once they line out for the senior team, they can't play Under-20s, which I find absolutely crazy. I know, Shane, you don't necessarily agree. But how do you see the Brendan Cummins' men going this evening?
Sure, look, there's probably an element of there's a greater element of pressure on Tipp now. You think that Waterford are down daily? I don't know, Mike is the second senior playing tonight, Fitzgerald, or is he injured, Brian?
Well, he's the guy. He's not starting.
Yeah.
Got a bad injury a couple of months ago in a challenge game, so he's on the bench. But
so like, there's probably pressure on Tipp to win. Look, it was an underwhelming performance last weekend, but it was a game nonetheless. They have miles in the legs. They have blown off the cobwebs. I thought an interesting thing is that they've changed the goalie, and that was an issue last week in the first 15 minutes. Like the short puck outs to the cornerbacks or to the wing backs and put Tipp in awful trouble, and Kerry swarmed on them and turned them over. So I don't know, Paddy Williams probably, in terms of, he's the diminutive goalkeeper, but his hurling and his striking at the ball is his great strength. So I said that's why he's gone into the goal. So you have Conor O'Brien coming in at wing back for Michael Corcoran, who's injured. Now that's a loss. Like, Michael Corcoran, really a good up and coming defender, so he has a shoulder problem, and they've rejigged the forward line with Kyle Shelley coming in at centre forward and moved Eddie Ryan into the corner. Now Tipp started off nearly with 5 half forwards against Kerry, but look, as the match went on, you could see that the wind was so strong in the first half of that match that the lads were coming back just to try and get involved. But I'd like to see more from the forward line. I thought, apart from Peter McGarry and maybe Ed Connolly's work rate on the wing, I thought Jack Leamy, Paddy Creed, and Eddie Ryan, they were peripheral. Like, I'd like to see them take the game a bit more to Waterford now tonight. Those three in particular. Look, Kyle Shelley was very, very busy coming off the bench, and like, he's one of those, you think he has the hurling and the physical size about him really to cause that Waterford defence problems. But I think we'll get a better sense out of Tipp tonight. You were on a hiding to nothing against Kerry last week. You're expected to win, and look, if you get off to a bad start as Tipp do, you can work your way into a bit of problems. You can be sure, look, there's a rivalry with Waterford. There's going to be a greater edge to these Tipp players tonight, and it's going to be a better performance. But it'll need to be. Look, you look at last year's minors. Look, I know it's not the same, but like, a lot of those, there will be some of those Waterford lads will be coming into Thurles tonight. They'll have no fear, and Waterford hurling's on a high at the moment. But it would be a nice win for Tipp to get now. Like this, it wasn't a crack Tipp minor team 3 years ago, like so. But you're looking for levels of improvement, and I think we'll have a better judgment on that Tipp team after tonight.
Yeah, Brian, what sort of a threat do you see Waterford producing here? I mean, you've already mentioned Mark Fitzgerald. He suffered that bad. I think it was a jaw injury that he got a couple of months back. But where's the big threat in this Waterford team?
Yeah, it's interesting. The manager of the Waterford Under-20 team, Gary Keefe, he was the manager of last year's minor team. And I suppose, look, unlike the senior team, there's a huge Ballygunner influence. The manager's obviously from Ballygunner. There's 3 in the starting lineup from Ballygunner, including Ronan Power, who was on their All-Ireland winning club team. They have 3 on the bench, and they have 3 in the extended panel. So and I suppose one of the players to look out for, anybody that's going to Semple Stadium tonight, Patrick Fitzgerald, at I think he's wearing maybe wing forward for Ward for 12 there on it. He's a real outstanding player. Very good in last year's minor game, and I suppose look, Waterford were comprehensive winners over Tipperary in the minor championship last year. I think Tipp got 3 goals in the last 5 minutes to take the bad look off it. So I'm expecting a real competitive game. There won't be much in it. Tipp have had the I suppose the Indian signing the last couple of years. It was at extra time last year and extra time the year before as well. So they've just about got over the line in the last year or two. Johnny Burke is interesting. I see they're listed at centre back. I'm not sure if he's going to play there. He normally plays, I suppose, at full forward. So there is a little bit of uncertainty. Waterford have done a lot of work, certainly since the start of the year, since once Christmas was over. They've done an awful lot of work with this under-20 panel in Carriganore. A lot of games played recently. They're quietly confident, I suppose, as well of making an impression in the championship, which is a little bit different this year. So it's not do or die. And I think both with Kerry in the side of the group, both Tipperary and Waterford are going to be still in the championship if I'm right in that shade.
Yeah.
So
and like you're probably thinking that the loser of tonight's game will probably be away to Cork in the semi-final. Like, so there is a bit at stake. Like, so because it's only the top 2 get to the Munster semi-final, and look, but even at that, you're picking your poison if you win it, because the other group lose with Clare, even in Limerick. Like, it all depends on how many Limerick lose maybe over the course of the next few weeks. You think Cahill O'Neill will probably be lost, and I don't know after that. I don't know whether Colin Coughlin and Adam English are that close. I'm sure maybe they could have been brought in, but it's I saw Paddy Fitzgerald playing for De La Salle against Nina CBS earlier in the year. His first touch, he's low centre of gravity. He's be interested to see who Tipperary put on him. Like Conor Wright, Cahill, I was very impressed with Cahill Quinn a few years ago at underage level. So that'd be a good test for him tonight if he's the one that maybe goes on him for a lot of it.
Yeah, and actually, just even speaking of that Limerick team and Cahill O'Neill probably being ineligible after this weekend, how did they get that win against Clare? I don't know, because Clare had to get, and actually Limerick had a brilliant start, but I think over like the next 50 odd minutes they only got 5 scores. Clare completely in control and somehow threw it away there. So do you want to make a prediction this evening, or do you think, Shane, it's just a bit too up in the air?
I'm not. Look, you can't not. Yeah, like it's hard to know. Like, you'd say Waterford probably on underage form, probably you think have a great chance, but look, they're down 2 of their best players. Like, so you think that probably evens it up a small bit. And you think Brendan Cummins, Fintan O'Connor, they're down in that Waterford border. You can be sure there'll be an extra, maybe a bit of pep in the speech tonight too. Like, and look, even if Tipp could win, it's a small bit more positivity going into Sunday too. Look, every little will help as well. Like, and be sure. Look, hopefully that's the case. I think it'll be a good game.
Yeah, what do you think, Brian?
Yeah, look, it's hard to know. I suppose, look, particularly these age groups where you're trying to knit maybe a couple of different years minor teams together. Until you've actually seen it, it's impossible to tell. But there's really been nothing between the sides in under 20, under 21 in recent years. I don't expect there's going to be much tonight. We've had extra time the last couple of years. It could be. I'd say it'll be close enough. There'll probably be a score or 2 either way, and I don't expect any more than that.
And in terms of the minors, then last night it was 2 goals in 2 minutes early enough in the second half that saw the Premier against Clare 2-13 to 13 points. First goal was for Paddy McCormick. He got his stick to Damien Corbett's sideline, and then Joe Egan and Corbett combined to set up Tom Delaney for a pretty sweet top corner goal. James Woodlock said afterwards, he said that was the card for us tonight, a win to top the group and then to have the Munster semi-final at home. Obviously beat Waterford then last week, 122 to 23 points. Great start for James Woodlock this year. And of course, you'd mentioned last week all the criticism that came after being beaten so heavily by Waterford last year and basically picking lads who were in their first year of minor. So this has been a great week or so for Woody.
It has. Look, I'm delighted for him. But look, he came in last year at very, very short notice, and the previous manager stepped down. I would say it caught them short. Like, they had to get a new management team pretty quick. They had COVID impact the year before, so it was the same for all teams. I got the sense that maybe Tipp were a bit more impacted by others in terms of not being able to put development squads together maybe the previous year. So look, he had to come in, try to put a new panel together. look, it didn't work out. As Brian said, they were given an awful chasing in that Munster semi-final by Waterford in Páirc Uí Rinn. But look, he mentally weaker managers would have walked away and said, how am I going to bridge this gap in a year? Look, he went to all the club games. He's really, and he selectors, like they scoured the county. And look, I was really impressed by the mental strength of that Tipp team last week in the Waterford game. I wasn't at Semple Stadium last night, but it was 8 points to 1-1 after 15 minutes. You said, go Waterford, we're going to steamroller them again. And they just worked their way back into the match and ended up winning the game coming from behind. And look, last night looked like a bit of a more dour game, not as open, bit low scoring. 2-13 is low scoring, I suppose, in the modern game. But look, that they found a way to win. And look, Tom Delaney, I saw him last week, himself and Damien Corbett inside. Tipp played sort of a two-man full forward line, and they try and work nice ball into those two because they have speed and they're diminutive. And like Tom Delaney likes to go for a goal as we saw. Like, so look, it's after. With the way the round robin is, the Tipp have done everything they've asked. They've won their 2 games. They have a home semi-final. They've avoided. Look, Cork have won the other group, so they can't meet Cork till a Munster final. But there's no guarantee that Tipp mightn't end up meeting Waterford or Clare again in a semi-final, depending on how strong or how weak maybe Limerick and no disrespect to Kerry are from in the other quarterfinals. So look, it was. I just thought in terms of getting used to that modern style hurling, I thought last week Tipp were very, very good at. After they settled, they looked nervous earlier on, but the half-back line, Sam Farrell, Tyke Sheehan, Jack O'Callaghan, and working the ball through the midfield, and guys prepared to maybe start an attack and go through the middle and carry the run on to get the second pass. Like elements like that, like they were comfortable doing those things. So look, you couldn't ask for more 2 wins from 2 and into a Munster semi-final.
Yeah, Brian, Tipperary haven't won a Munster title at minor level since 2018, so it's a great start if Tipp are going in that direction.
Oh yeah, and look, in fairness, there would have been a significant amount of criticism after last year's performance, as Shane mentioned. But I think the last time I was up this end of the country, listening to Tipp FM, James Woodlock was talking about, look, there's no excuses. They've had a full year's preparation, and you can certainly see that. They do look well coached. And they're comfortable on the ball. They're comfortable, working the ball through the different areas. And they do have 2 inside guys. It's almost kind of the what a lot of teams are looking to now. 2 good strikers close to the goal. They certainly have that. Corbett and Delaney are as good as what's in it. I think at minor level. Centre forward very, very impressive last night. I think it's Egan from McCarthy Burris.
Yeah,
a fine good player, able to win his own possession.
I think he was in the half back line last year. Like, so it just shows you the way you can move. If you find a different fit for the same player, that 1 year to the next.
Goalkeeper out very good as well. I mean, it kind of starts back there. If you have a goalkeeper who's, I think it's Horgan from Knockavilla, good striker of the ball, who's a good hurler, who's able to deliver, accurate puck outs, accurate clearances, gives that confidence. And, they certainly, as I said, they have all the appearance of a very well coached team who know exactly what they're trying to do. And again, I think they have a chap from St. Mary's, Clonmel. Is it Sheehan?
Tyke Sheehan, centre back, yeah.
Again, he's kind of that Tyke de Burka who hangs around an awful lot as well. And, they seem to know exactly what they're trying to do. Which is a great compliment, I suppose, to James Woodlock and the management team. Now, there is the expectation or the fear or the perception out there that Cork are the team to beat, and they've certainly been shooting the lights out. And if you look at, I suppose, underage and even schools hurling in the last few years, Cork have certainly been the team to beat, and that may well be the case. But it was a brilliant win last week to go down to Farfield and beat Waterford, who were quite a bit stung after it, to be honest with you. They did expect to win that game, and they still expect to come back into the championship. And I thought Clare were a little bit disappointing last night. I would expect maybe Waterford to turn them over next week up in Clare. So there's a lot still to play for. But, I think, like you said, Tipp with a home semi-final, you couldn't ask for any more after the first 2 performances.
Well, that's brilliant stuff, Brian. Really appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to you again.
Before Brian goes, I will throw it out to the 2. who's your top three in each province?
Oh, Jesus. Go on, Brian, you go first.
In Munster, it will be Limerick, Waterford, and Tipperary. In Leinster, Kilkenny, Galway, and Dublin.
So you're leaving out Wexford, right? Okay.
It's
I
fine.
just need. I think we all need to see Limerick play a championship this year. Just you hear the rumours of so many different injuries, and if it goes wrong the first day, and maybe they pick up another injury, or maybe a suspension or something like that. But you have to give them the respect that they're going to come through and get it right. So I think Limerick to come through, Waterford to come through, and Tipperary to come through. I'm just hoping Cork do what they've done over the years, which is find a way to beat themselves. But I actually do fancy them to beat Limerick this weekend. And on the other side, I'm not going to not pick Dublin. So I'll pick Dublin to go through. I'll pick Galway. I'm actually picking the exact same as you, Brian, as it happens. Yeah. Galway to get through, Kilkenny and Dublin. Huh?
Yeah.
Definitely not going to happen. So we're on
yeah, you probably not. Shane, do you want to pick yours?
Yeah, I went Limerick, Waterford. As I was in my column this week, and I said conventional wisdom says it'll be Limerick, Waterford, Cork, Kilkenny, Galway, and Wexford. But one of those six won't make it out. 2018, nobody said Tipp would be the fall guy. They fell. 2019, nobody said Galway would be the team to fall. They fell. One of those six won't make it out. And hopefully it might be Cork. And that I said it last week. I said Tipp Cork could be for all the marbles in third place in the last round. Like that would be a serious game in Semple Stadium if that was the case. I fancy Limerick 5 or 6 points this weekend. I think there's going to be steam coming out of their ears this weekend in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It'd be some match to be at a neutral 40,000 people next Sunday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It'd be something else. If we weren't in Walsh Park. Huh?
Apart from the traffic down in Páirc around.
Oh yeah, but just as a neutral, like if we weren't in Walsh Park, the folks in that one, like to sit there and it'd be unbelievable. What you say?
The helicopter to land me in the showgrounds beside Park.
We get JP. Sure, JP might fly from Walsh Park to showgrounds in 15 minutes or something.
Well, look, as I said, thanks very much, Brian. Great to get your insights, and we'll
cheers,
chat
Brian.
Again soon. Yeah, as it happens, I am actually going to be at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I'm going to be that neutral at the game this weekend. Work has taken me there this weekend. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I'll be watching Tipp Waterford on telly. To talk about the Tipperary football exploits at the moment, heavy enough defeat for the Under-20s against Clare. You'd be hoping for a bit more positivity when the minors play against Limerick and Semple, on Thursday.
Yeah, disappointing on Monday night. Look, I suppose the carryover from minor was that there wasn't much. Tipp struggled in 19 and 20 at minor level. You were thinking, okay, you'd like to see maybe an improvement for in 2022 at under 20 level. But God, 316 to 2-4, something like that. Very comprehensive for Clare. Like so. But you'd hope to think maybe look if we can start at development level again, 16, 17 years of age, and getting that group of players, and I suppose initially start consistently beating the Limericks and the Waterfords and the Clares again. And I suppose we have this mini round robin system in minor football where Tipp, Clare, Waterford, and Limerick will all play each other, and following that, and a final that team goes on with Cork and Kerry into the Munster semi-finals. So be interested to see how they go. New manager John McNamara for Clonmel Commercials, a family steeped in football tradition in the club and in the county. So look, I'm sure they'll be well prepared. But look, there's a rising tide in Limerick football too, and like Paul Kinnerk is behind that football development squad down there too. And look, you can see their senior footballers are up to Division 2, and I thought their under-20 footballers were quite decent last year, even though they were narrowly beaten by Tipp. So, but look, if I'd be interested, I suppose it'll be interesting to see tomorrow whether Limerick are further down the road in terms of development, or our Tipp struggling a bit. I suppose. Look, I would say with the 20s and with the minors, if you played a challenge match in terms of Gaelic football between the Tipp under-20 hurlers and under-20 footballers, I think the under-20 hurlers would win because there's an awful lot of players that are on the under-20 hurling squad that would be good enough to play under-20 football, and are probably the same minor level as well. Like there's probably good guys that are probably veered into minor hurlers. And look, with the way that the competition structures are and played side by side, dual players, just really not realistic. Like so, sure. Look, we won't really know an awful lot about Tipp minors until we see them play tomorrow. Like, and sure, we wish them the best of luck.
Yeah. So then, a final point. Then, just the other games broadly in championship. Darry Egan, I suppose he's making his championship debut as manager of Wexford up against Henry Shefflin, who of course is in the same boat with Galway. Do you think Egan, like I know we were previewing it there, and Wexford seemed to be the odd team out really, but what are your thoughts on where Egan is going with this team? Obviously, just horrendous performance against Waterford in the league semi-final, and they were battered.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? It's okay. What you think? Wexford sort of were, I suppose their run was brought to a shuddering halt by Waterford. In some ways, maybe it was no bad thing. Maybe they weren't as good as maybe the performances, and I suppose the results were suggesting, and maybe a bit of a grounding was no bad thing. And they did some silly things that day in terms of their discipline. It's like lads who were mentally tired or mentally fatigued. Maybe they had a heavy week's training. I don't know. But I'd like to think they'll be fully fresh for this one on Saturday evening against Galway. I think Galway, as I said earlier, are a lot like Tipperary. They sort of you thought after the league game against Limerick, they got this Shefflin really has something to work with, but I think they sort of tapered off after that, and then you were wondering, was that Limerick performance as good as it was made out to be, considering Limerick struggled in a lot of the games. So, but I think home advantage might shade it in Wexford's direction, and the fact they have Dublin at home the week after, I think that's why I think Wexford might survive, and that's why I haven't picked Dublin purely on the basis that they will have to go away from home against Galway and against Wexford, and then there's no guarantee Dublin will win their home game against Kilkenny either. That's why maybe the schedule is counted against Dublin this year. But I think it's while Munster Championship gets a lot of the column inches, like that Leinster Championship is going to be no less interesting. Like it's just a pity from, I suppose, the Laois and Westmeath's point of view that their meeting is maybe not in the first weekend where one of them might get a win and get something to take into the rest of the games, where that match is sort of left till the very end, when probably it's the only thing it's going to mean is who's not going to get relegated to the McDonagh Cup for next year, which is
the only thing is, I thought about that and I was like, but at least it leaves them something to be playing for all the way to the very end. If you lose your first game, Laois Westmeath, you lose your first game, you kind of know you're gone.
Yeah.
You're pretty much on the floor.
Maybe so. And I suppose the Leinster Council probably have, whether it's by accident or design, they sort of have stumbled across the way that Dublin, Galway and Kilkenny Wexford has been in their last two round robin series, has been the last set of games, and maybe they're going to have it like that from now on. That you're going to have two barnstorming games, and look, if you get what happened 3 years ago where Galway got relegated, got missed out on score difference and a simultaneous throw-ins that night, it was great drama altogether.
Yeah, I was at the Galway Dublin game that night. It was unbelievable in Parnell Park. Great round of games coming up this weekend in Leinster, Wexford, Galway, Westmeath, Kilkenny. You'd imagine Kilkenny will win that. Their first two games are Westmeath and Laois, which should be two wins to set them up nicely. One more result and you're pretty much through.
Are you going anywhere Saturday?
I'm going to be at Dublin Laois on Saturday at Parnell Park, 6:30. That'll be a good one. I think Dublin will win that by 8 or 9 points. The one thing is, I said this before, I think that this Dublin team might be more suited to playing at other grounds rather than the tight Parnell Park. We've probably talked about that before. Laois have won some big games in Parnell Park, so that'll probably be a good game all the same. And then obviously we know Waterford, Tipperary and Cork Limerick. There'll be blood in the water down at Páirc Uí Chaoimh.
I like it. It's you just wish the GA would get on board with hype and promotion. Look, I in some ways I hate hype, but it's so quiet going into this start of this championship. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, for players, bar the odd one, aren't talking to the media, so there's the whole GPA.
the defending All-Ireland hurling and football champions are playing this weekend. You wouldn't even know Tyrone are playing this weekend. It's ridiculous. Like it's football. It's up in Ulster, but like it is ridiculous. And okay, you can say the GPA thing where maybe all the 4-month provincial councils haven't had their big launches, but that doesn't mean the GA can't be taking out ads and say get your tickets here and just throwing it up. Like you know as well as I do. Look, you have Heineken Cup this weekend, and look.
I actually don't.
Well, to be but like that's like you've got it. I just sometimes I don't like the way the GA try to take their supporters for granted. They'll come. We won't. We look. There's no point in putting it in their face. The same way maybe the way the Tipp tickets and they'll buy their tickets on Friday and Saturday. They'll get down there eventually. Just I don't like the way they take it for granted. I'd like to see them take a step forward and promote their game a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, either way, we're hoping for a big performance from Tipperary this weekend. The Nini Guardian is out now, so get all the best previews there. Shane, we'll be chatting again soon.
Talk to you next week.